Hey guys, welcome back to the channel where you can find all of your basic guides on Total War games. Today we are looking at the individual roles of each unit for Kislev. It should be noted that all Kislev infantry and cav have a passive ability called By Our Blood, which has one use and it makes the unit unbreakable for 30 seconds. As always, timestamps can be found in the description if you would like to skip to a particular portion of the video. First up on the list of lords is Tsarina Katerin. She is a spellcaster with access to the lore of ice. She's a decent melee combatant, but you should probably keep her away from fighting other melee type lords. And then we'll get into her abilities and spells. Stand Your Ground, Ice Shard, and Frostfang. And then she has her ice spells, as well as Encourage, giving leadership bonuses to nearby allies. By Our Blood, your basic Kislev ability. And then Frost Shield and Arcane Conduit. She also has access to the Crystal Cloak, giving her 20% damage resistance, and then also a base 15% missile resistance. Next up we have Kostalton, which is more focused on buffing your troops and fighting in melee compared to Tsarina. He has access to a number of buffing spells called Battle Prayers, which are listed here: Ursun's Roar, Da's Song of Winter Sunlight, Salyak's Lullaby, and Tor's Battle Hymn. He also has access to Armor Piercing and Flaming Damage, with the trait Frenzy making him stronger while his leadership is high. Kostalton should be kept fighting alongside your frontline units, buffing them to no end. The Ice Witches are just spellcaster lords with access to their specified lore of magic. In this case for Kislev, they will be the Tempest and Ice lore. Lastly, we have the Boyar. This lord is your typical melee combatant. Armored with anti-infantry bonuses, he'll be used to fight alongside your frontline units and also used to duel with other lords and heroes. He has the abilities Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, Stand Your Ground, Axe of Tor. He has Expert Charge Defense, Encourage, just like any other lord, By Our Blood, Heroic Resilience, Blood of the Motherland, and a 15% missile resistance. Next, we're moving on to the heroes of Kislev, which are the Frost Maidens. There are two types of maidens, Ice and Tempest, and they are basically the same as the Ice Witches, but just hero types. Lastly, we have the Patriarch. He is the hero version of Kostalton. He provides the same battle prayers, but is much weaker. His main uses will be buffing up the frontline engagements, while also fighting in them. Armoured Kossars are your first frontline unit. These are cheap and quite decent in holding your front line against early and mid-game units. They are armored and shielded with pistols, so they are able to get off a few volleys before the frontline engagement starts. Try to keep these away from armor-piercing units for better value. These will be mainly used for your frontline engagements as they are slow and tanky. Armored Kossars with great weapons give up their shields for armor-piercing damage and higher melee attack, but lower melee defense. This trade-off allows you to have an early game armor-piercing option against those heavily armored frontline units. They are also great for bolstering your frontline engagements against armored infantry. Tzar Guard will be your late game frontline unit. These are heavily armored and shielded, an excellent unit for holding the frontline but not much else. These are quite costly, so if you are on a budget, bringing 1 to 3 of these will provide the best value. Tzar Guard with great weapons will be the armor-piercing variant of these, and these are great for killing heavily armored elite units. Great armor-piercing damage with anti-infantry bonuses. You should bring 1 to 2 of these, just so you have a counter against those armored elite units in the mid and late game. Kossars are your first missile infantry. They are pretty standard for low-tier missiles and can be quite cost-effective in taking out other missile infantry or providing support on the frontline engagement against non-armored units. They are also considered a hybrid unit, so they can hold their own in melee combat if they are flanked. Kossars with spears are basically the same as the basic Kossars, except they are anti-large, have charge defense against large units, and have charge reflection, which deals additional damage when attacking charging enemies. These will be most useful on the flanks of your missile infantry lines in case of any cav flanks. The famous Streltsy. These are another hybrid gun and great axe infantry. They have armor-piercing damage for both melee and ranged attacks, so they will be incredibly useful in countering heavily armored infantry. Since they are gun units, you will need to make sure they have a clear line of fire to their targets, otherwise they will not fire at all. In order to generate the most value, be sure to target armored units or large units. Ice Guards with swords are your higher tier missile infantry, and these are great hybrid units. Both ammunition and melee attacks apply frostbite, which greatly reduce their target speed, and they have even more range than all of the units before it. They are also immune to psychology, making them great for fighting off terror-causing infantry. These are best used by unloading all of their ammunition into high-value targets like elite units or lords, and then sending them into melee once they run out of ammunition. Ice Guard with Glaives are your anti-large variants. These give up melee attack for more melee defense and anti-large bonuses with charge defense and charge reflection. These will be great for hovering around the flanks of your back lines, as they will do great against cav units attempting to get into your more vulnerable units. Aside from that, you will still unload their ammunition into high value targets, and then send them into melee once out of ammunition. Kossovite Dervishes are your light cav. These are very fast with vanguard deployment, so you will be able to hide them on the sides of the battlefields to create more opportunities for flanking. These units will be mainly used for disrupting the backline infantry. Don't leave them in prolonged combat as they don't have great melee stats, and you really just want to stop the missile infantry from firing. You can maybe get away with leaving them in prolonged combat against low tier missile infantry with little armor, but that's about it. Winged Lancers are your first shot cav with decent charge bonus and anti-infantry bonuses, and they also cause fear. Slightly slower than your Kossovite Dervishes, so they will be mainly used for your hammer and anvil tactics on the frontline engagements. Make sure to not leave them in prolonged combat, as most of their damage comes from the charge and a few seconds after the charge. The Gryphon Legion are another shot cav unit with slightly better stats in almost all categories, with their trade-offs being slower speed. They should be utilized in the same way as the Winged Lancers, psycho-charging the backs of the enemy frontline units. The Warbear Riders. This is your anti-large armor-piercing cav option. They are quite expensive, so you may only want to bring one or two of them, and they will be best used for taking down other cav units, monstrous units, or lords on mounts fighting in your frontline engagements. In order to generate the most value, don't waste their time on infantry. Horse Archers are your skirmishing units. They can fire while moving, they're very fast, and they can also vanguard deploy. These can be used in many ways, so they'll be used for firing into the backs of the enemy frontline units to fully ignore their shield bonuses. You can fire them into enemy missile units and then chase them down, or you can use them to pester the enemy while they are still marching towards your army. Best targets for Horse Archers will be low tier units or low armored units. The Little War Sleds are a chariot unit with missile firing capabilities. Since these are chariots, you will mainly be using them to plow through isolated enemies or your basic hammer and anvil strat on the enemy front lines. They will also be firing off armor-piercing ammunition as you are doing so, which provides a small amount of value over time. Heavy War Sleds are the more expensive version of the previous War Sleds, and they sacrifice speed for higher melee combat stats and charge bonus. These will be used in the same way as the Little War Sleds. The Snow Leopard. This war beast has anti-large bonuses with armor-piercing damage, and they are very fast with a speed of 100. These are great for catching light cav or other warhound-like units. They also have 20% physical resistance, giving them some tankiness. The Big Boy Elemental Bear. This heavily armored monstrosity will wreak havoc on your frontline engagements. It has armor-piercing damage, causes terror, unbreakable, and has a physical resistance of 25%. High melee attack but low melee defense, so don't let him get completely surrounded, and keep him away from anti-large units, as he will take damage very quickly. He does have an ability called Elemental Breath, causing explosive damage and frostbite to its target. His main use will be to support your frontline engagements. Little Grom will be your only artillery option. These armor-piercing cannons will mainly be used for sniping enemy lords and heroes or large units like monsters or cav. If Little Grom runs out of ammunition, you could always send them into melee, as they are pretty decent melee combatants. So that about wraps it up for our Kislev unit roster guide. I hope you found this useful for your Kislev campaigns. or it helped you decide that Kislev is the faction for you. You can find my suggestions for early and late game army comps in the video description. If you enjoy this content, make sure you drop a like. Also, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.